Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
This is really a video I didn't want to make because after the Virgo Triad debacle, I thought that community would police itself. Well, it appears it hasn't. I only became aware of this channel relatively recently. The channel was started in July 2022. Of course, has the dry eBay links, the Cash Apps, the PayPals, has done the merch sales. But what really caught my attention was her strapline and hearing that her husband may have been a convicted murderer. There's her strapline, reaping frauditors, sovsits, Karens, and the worst of society. Now, you don't get much worse than a murderer, and I believe this is a photo that she's put together because he's inside of her and the murderer. It's made to look as though they're together. I've also found out that she has a fairly recent criminal record. Now, of course, her husband, and I say her husband, I'm not sure if they're married or not, has had a jailhouse conversion to Jesus. Of course, being the skeptic that I am, I severely doubt that. But what I do know is she wasn't honest with her audience about him, or the fact that she herself committed a crime fairly recently. He is definitely, and she is probably, worse than many people she commentates on. They may have even committed a criminal act together in Texas regarding the selling of paintings that he did on the inside. I'll deal with her criminal record and the fact that there are GoFundMes and who knows what regarding her later, but by far the most interesting bit of this story is the story of the murder that the husband committed. Now, fortunately for us, the offence report still exists, and rather than go through it page by page, as he appears to have planned the events of the day, we'll start with his plan, which he rather foolishly appears to have written down for police to find. So, Deputy Schumann, in examining the items removed from the red backpack, which had been discarded by Robert Hernandez Jr. moments prior to his arrest, found the various items to be consistent with a plan to kidnap a person and then items that could be used to restrain a person. A one-page note, Exhibit E29A, reads, letters to G, P, C, fuck her royally, restrain her, plant letters, stay until Jenny shows up, then leave no later than 6 o'clock. So then the officer notes, it is the opinion of investigators that this note was the plan of action which Robert Hernandez Jr. had developed in the process of planning the kidnapping and possible murder of Genevieve Finn. Now, things didn't go according to plan, which was probably fortunate for his then wife, but resulted in the murder of Genevieve. Now I'm going to look at witness statements. On December 1, 1996, Deputy Danny Irwin and Deputy Schumann interviewed and took written statement from a Mr. was a passenger in Deputy Irwin's vehicle when Deputy Irwin first received the call to Ginny Finn residence in response to a domestic disturbance. Mr. observed the suspect flee from Deputy Irwin and also witnessed Deputy Irwin chasing the subject. Mr. also was a passenger in the patrol vehicle when Constable Weldon Tucker transported the suspect to the Real County Sheriff's Office in Leakey, Texas. And this first witness submitted a written statement. And as you can see, Frauditor Reaper's husband was caught close to the scene of the murder. Right, the second witness statement. On December 1, 1996, at approximately 6:40 a.m, Sergeant Coy Smith and Sheriff James E. Bryce interviewed Mrs. Hernandez. Mrs. Hernandez is the wife of Robert Hernandez Jr., and they were separated at the time of the incident. Hernandez submitted a written statement, and a copy of her statement is included in this report as Attachment D. In summary, Mrs. Hernandez was staying at the residence of Genevieve Finn when the murder took place. Mrs. Hernandez stated that she was sleeping on the couch in the living room when she was awakened by Genevieve screaming, and Mrs. Hernandez heard Genevieve screaming Robert's name. Mrs. Hernandez stated that she ran for help to the residence of Mr. Blank. Mrs. Hernandez stated she saw Robert Hernandez Jr. chasing Mr. Blank back from the Finn residence to aid Genevieve. Mrs. Hernandez also stated that she saw Robert Hernandez Jr. hiding by a vehicle and then run from Deputy Danny Irwin when he first arrived. Right, next witness statement. On 1st December 1996, Sergeant Coy Smith and Real County Sheriff James E. Bryce interviewed Mr. Blank regarding the murder incident. Mr. Blank submitted a written statement, and a copy of that statement is included in this report as Attachment E. In summary, Mr. Blank stated that he had known that Mrs. Hernandez and Robert Hernandez were having marriage problems, and that he had heard that Robert had hit Mrs. Hernandez before. Mr. Blank stated that he was asleep when Mrs. Hernandez had awakened him and told him that Robert had broken into Ginny's house. Mr. Blank stated he got dressed and ran to Ginny's house to the side of the house. Mr. Blank stated that he could not see Robert running and that he could see Jimmy's body laying on the floor in the kitchen. Mr. Blank stated that he called Robert's name and recognised the person running as Robert, even though the person running was wearing camo and a mask on his face. Mr. Blank stated that Robert chased him back to the Blank residence, where they struggled and where Mr. Blank hit Robert with a flashlight. Mr. Blank stated that Robert crawled under his truck but fled when Deputy Irwin arrived. Right, the next witness statement. On December 1, 1996, Sergeant Coy Smith and Real County Sheriff James E. Bryce interviewed Blank. Blank submitted a written statement, and a copy of that statement is included in this report as Attachment F. In summary, Blank stated that she heard a girl's voice in the house, and when she went to check, she saw Mrs. Hernandez on the phone calling the law. Blank stated that Mrs. Hernandez had told her that Robert was in Ginny's house, and that after Blank had left to go to the Finn residence, that she saw Blank running back to the Blank residence, and that Robert was chasing Mr. Blank. Mrs. Blank stated that when they both got back to the residence, that Mr. Blank and Robert started fighting. Mrs. Blank stated that Mr. Blank hit Robert with the flashlight and that Robert then went and hid by the pickup. Mrs. Blank stated that Robert ran when Deputy Irwin showed up and that she went back to Ginny's house to try and help Ginny. And next one. On December 1, 1996, Sergeant Coy Smith and Real County Sheriff James E. Bryce interviewed Blank. Blank submitted a written statement, and a copy of that statement is included in this report as Attachment G. In summary, Blank witnessed part of the struggle at the Blank residence and witnessed Robert flee as Deputy Irwin showed up. On December 1, 1996, Sergeant Coy Smith and Real County Sheriff James E. Bryce interviewed Blank. Blank submitted a written attachment, and a copy of that statement is included in this report as Attachment H. In summary, Blank stated that she knew Robert and Mrs. Hernandez were having marital problems, and that the day before at work that Robert had told that he and Mrs. Hernandez could be happy if he just get rid of Ginny. I think the witness statements were worth reading through in detail because they basically prove that he was identified at the scene, and there's no reason to think that he isn't the one that committed the crime. We've also got the context of the plan that he did went wrong immediately because he didn't get to his wife first. Right, now on to the details of the murder, and if you're squeamish, you should probably not listen to this bit. As you can see, the crime occurred at 1:30 a.m. and if you remember the note, it said be out by 6, I think. Police received the report at 1:54 a.m. and the complainant victim is Genevieve Marissa Finn, date of birth December 10, 1975. So if you work that out, she was 20 years of age. Right, onto the synopsis. On December 1996, at approximately 1:30 a.m., defendant Robert Zamora Hernandez Jr. went to the Genevieve Marissa Finn residence in Campwood, Texas, to carry out the planned kidnapping of his wife, Mrs. Hernandez, who was staying at the residence. Robert Hernandez Jr. and Mrs. Hernandez were separated at the time. Robert Hernandez Jr. climbed into the house through an unlocked living room window and was discovered hiding in the kitchen by Genevieve Finn. Genevieve Finn was attacked and was stabbed repeatedly by Robert Hernandez Jr. Mrs. Hernandez was awakened and, hearing the assault, fled from the residence and summoned help at the residence of Mr. Blank. Mr. Blank went to the Finn residence and observed Robert Hernandez Jr. fleeing out the back, and Robert Hernandez Jr. began chasing Mr. Blank back to the residence of Mr. Blank, where Mr. Blank and Robert Hernandez Jr. struggled. Mr. Blank struck Robert Hernandez Jr. with a flashlight, and Robert Hernandez Jr. then started walking off. The responding deputy sheriff was notified of the suspect's location, and the suspect was arrested after a brief chase. Genevieve Finn died as a result of her wounds. Robert Hernandez Jr. submitted a written statement regarding the attempted kidnapping of Mrs. Hernandez and the assault on Genevieve Finn. Robert Hernandez Jr. has been charged with capital murder, and there's the investigating officers. I'm just going to pick out bits from this. We see Deputy Sheriff Dennis Schumann was notified at approximately 2:10 a.m. and arrived on the scene at 2:40 a.m. They were met by the first attendees, and he was informed that the residence belonged to the victim and that Robert Hernandez Jr. had broken into the house and had stabbed Genevieve Finn numerous times. He got a brief report about how Robert Hernandez Jr. was captured. And at item 5, you'll see that Deputy Irwin stated that they were looking in the area for a red backpack, which Robert Hernandez Jr. had in his possession when he first fled from Deputy Irwin, but that Robert Hernandez Jr. managed to discard prior to being arrested by Deputy Irwin, and that backpack is important. A video was taken of the crime scene. The backpack was recovered near an alley in the block across the street from the Finn residence, and photos were taken of the backpack and part of its contents. You'll then see that a full description of the murder house was done. Just drawing your attention that there was a red Ford Receiver with a flat right rear tyre. Pause it if you want to read this. I'm just flicking through it. And now on to the crime scene evidence. You can see the scene was photographed and evidence collected. The receiver to the telephone was laying on the dining room table, and Mrs. Hernandez had confirmed that the phone was intact and properly working when she'd gone to bed earlier that evening. The investigators concluded that the telephone was purposely disabled by Robert Hernandez Jr. You'll see that in the centre bedroom there was a large amount of bloodstains and splatters on the floor. The bloodstains in the centre of the bedroom also had smear marks, which appeared to be drag marks leading from the centre of the bedroom towards the door leading to the kitchen. There were blood splatters on the bed and the south wall behind the bed. 2 blood-stained knife blades were seen on the floor, which had been broken off at the handles, and both of the blades were bent. One knife blade was 5 5/8 inches and the other one was 4 5/8 inches in length. A third bloodstained knife blade, which had been broken off at the handle, measured approximately 3 inches in length and was laying on the bed near the foot end. A fourth bloodstained knife, a dinner knife, was observed laying on the floor of the bedroom near the clothes closet. Investigators observed a black handle which appeared to have been broken off one of the knives laying near the centre of the bedroom on the floor. Are you getting a sense of the viciousness of this attack? The black handle was blood-stained. A wooden handle was observed laying on the floor. The wooden handle appeared to have been broken off from one of the knife blades already mentioned. They found a short wooden club near the bedding. Also near the foot of the bed, they observed a light blue Nerf-type bat, and this bat was blood-stained. On the bed, the investigators observed a blood-stained quilt and a red blanket. In the clothes sitting on the floor, the investigators observed the handle from the blue Nerf bat laying on top of the clothes in the basket. Obviously, all these items were photographed and tagged appropriately. Then in the kitchen area, investigators observed bloodstains smeared and splattered on the floor, smeared on the black door, splattered on the countertop, and splattered on a plastic bag sitting on the floor near the rear door. The victim had been found by responding officers and emergency personnel laying on the kitchen floor with her head by the sink and her feet pointing towards the rear door. They also observed a blood-stained spatula on the countertop and a blood-stained can opener. And once again we see mention of the red Ford vehicle parked on the street in front of the residence with the right rear tyre, which was flat, had a cut on the side wall of the tyre. Obviously we see the integrity of the evidence being maintained. Here we can see how they recovered Robert's clothing, and a lot of it was blood-stained. And at item 4 you can see that the deputy was advised that additional items had been recovered near the scene. The deputies were met by various citizens who had located one black handle with no blade and one vegetable peeler laying on the street. The vegetable peeler was bloodstained and the blade was bent, and they were found in the exact same location where Hernandez had been tackled shortly after he was arrested. Obviously forensic items taken from the scene and also from Robert Hernandez. Item 8 is important because it indicates that Robert Hernandez himself had told investigators that he had taken 2 steak knives with him when he entered the Finn residence. It also appears he advised the investigators that he had gone to the Finn residence for the purpose of kidnapping his wife. At 9 you can see they recovered from the backpack 1 roll of masking tape, 1 handwritten note, 1 6-page handwritten letter, 2 white envelopes, 2 black pens, 1 1-page handwritten note, 2 back braces and 1 black waist support, 1 white belt with the name of Mrs. Hernandez on it, 1 roll of elastic bandage, 2 clear plastic bags, 1 safety pin. I've already dealt with the plan earlier in this video. So on to item 10. You can see it was the opinion of the investigators that the roll of masking tape and the other waist support items and restraining belt were to be used to restrain Mrs. Hernandez. The other letters found in the backpack will also support the plan which Robert Hernandez Jr. outlined, which stated plant letters, and it is these letters that Robert Hernandez Jr. had planned to plant at the scene. 1 note, which was 1 page in length, reads, "Hey friend, well this is pretty hard, but it'll have to do. I still have those feelings for you, but I don't show them. That's really the hard part. Well, just wanted to say hi, Mrs. Hernandez." As regards the 6-page letter, they thought it may actually comprise 1 2-page letter and 1 4-page letter. "Robert, let me begin with, I don't know why, but I just did. I get, as you would say, a hard-on by making people miserable. I love this community, you were right. Everyone is easy to get along with. That's the reason why I lied and pled you were a bad person. Also, the truth is, I'm not ready to settle down. Paul, well, only because you look to him, and Ginny. I don't want to be a nurse. It was just small talk with those 2 gullible done arse. One a woman with 2 kids, different fathers, who is way too judgmental. The other because he made everything easier for me to make you hurt. Just because you were too gullible. Actually, the biggest one of them at all. I'll tell you more, but ask Jenny. She'll fill you in. Ha, I've left and will return when my rent is due to take my stuff. Have fun in jail, even though you're actually innocent. Good luck, explain this one. Always getting the better hand, XXX. The investigators thought that this was a letter intended to send to himself and state that Mrs. Hernandez had written it. Its intended purpose was to explain the absence of Mrs. Hernandez, while at the same time sway law enforcement to think that the pending charges against Robert were false. The 4-page letter reads, "Time to be honest. I would have told you today, but it just didn't seem right. This is a chicken shit way to do this, but hey, it works. I have lied to you from day one. XXXXXX never did anything wrong to me, except love me too much. He has been the perfect husband, and I just didn't want to be tied down. You and everyone else made it easy for me to make my exit and end this chapter of my life. I can't believe you all brought my stories from day one. I was too easy. It blew my mind when you would believe me, an outsider to someone you've known all your life. Too easy. Paul, well, he has nothing I would ever want compared to what I had. Looks, Robert wins. Body, Robert wins. And being trustworthy, Robert wins. Robert may have been miserable, but he would have never messed around on me. Everybody in this one-horse town made it too easy because you're all too gullible. The reason I ever mentioned Paul was because Robert looked up to him, and you too. He wanted to be like you and Paul because he said you had your head on straight. You see, my pleasure is watching somebody be miserable. But when Robert started to become a better aide than me, I hated it, especially when I knew that once we took the med-aid class, he would pass and I wouldn't. It's no big thing, but he is smarter than me. The other thing is, for about 3 months on my days off, when he was working, I slept with anyone, even his family. I guess I screwed 9 different people, and nobody did it right but Robert. I guess that's all I'm going to miss from this town, but shit happens. I've gone with Josh, and he has taken me to Georgia to be with my family until I find another sucker. He's a guy from Uvalde who I've been seeing regularly. I'll be back to get my stuff and make my quitting right, but I've sucked the life from this person, so my deed is done. I would have stayed, but now that he is going to jail, it's going to take the fun out of it. Thanks for making this easy. Ha ha. XXX. They weren't able to determine who this 4-page letter was for, but it was their opinion that he drafted this letter, and the intended purpose of the letter was to explain the absence of Mrs. Hernandez and to discredit Mrs. Hernandez's credibility. Another purpose of the letter was build up Robert Hernandez Jr.'s image and possibly to solicit sympathy for himself. Well, that completes my review of the police report, but let's remember that the vicious murderer mentioned in the police report, Robert Hernandez Jr., is the man on the left of this picture who Frauditor Reaper is proud to call her husband. Now, I don't know if you'll find this post still on her channel. I know she's been wiping quite a lot, trying to cleanse what she said about her husband. But as you can see, she states, I will be holding an auction for a couple of my husband's paintings that he did. Why? Because I need room, LOL. He also takes requests for anything you'd like made. Now let's have a look at Texas Government Code 497.010. The offence is sale or offer of sale of prison-produced articles or products. A person commits an offence if the person intentionally sells or offers to sell on the open market in this state an article or product the person knows was manufactured in whole or in part by an inmate of the department or an inmate in any correctional facility or reformatory institution in this state or in any other state other than an inmate, 1, who is on community supervision, parole, or mandatory supervision. That's not relevant. 2, employed by an enterprise that has employed the inmate in order to take advantage of the franchise tax credit offered under, and there's a subchapter there, but it's not relevant. 3, participating in a federally certified prison industry enhancement program, not relevant. B, an offence under this section is a Class B misdemeanor. C, it is an exception to the application of this section that the article or product sold is 1, a state flag or similar item produced for sale or distribution by the legislator under section 301.071, not relevant, or 2, a service provided under a contract for which the private sector / prison industry enhancement certificate program operated by the Bureau of Justice Assistance and authorized by 18 U.S.C. section 1761 does not require certification. D, it is an exception to the application of this section that the actor was an inmate or state jail defendant confined in a facility operated by or under contract with the department who sold or offered to sell an art or craft in the manner authorised under section 501.013 brackets B. Now, this post on her channel does appear to be an offer for sale, and so prima facie evidence that she has committed that misdemeanour act, although there's no charges pending regarding that at present. But in order to judge someone's character, I don't need charges. I need to see actions. I don't have to prove things beyond reasonable doubt. I just have probabilities that she's attempted to commit crime here. This next one, we go to a crime she actually did commit while she was running her YouTube channel, criticising the worst of society, and she herself is a shoplifter. And it's not just a packet of chicken, as she claimed initially. Others will prove the value of the goods. As you can see, she committed the theft, the shoplifting theft, in October last year. She actually pled guilty on the 24th of October last year. She was sentenced to 90 days in jail, with 75 of those days being suspended and 15 days home incarceration. She also incurred costs of $193 and $25 fine. Now I was going to go into the GoFundMe, some of the merch that she's advertised, her many stories of her unlucky life, and she's got some stories, I can tell you. Her new grift or restarted grift of finding ghosts. But I need to finish sometime, so let's just finish with my opinions. Some may have befriended her. Some may be friends with her once all the information is out. However, she was the one that brought her husband into her story. So her husband is not off limits. She, I believe, is a wrong 'un. She fails the sniff test, and she is no place to criticise other scum of society. Thanks for watching.